Hello. Well, this week we're going to do another chiasm. We found one in another narrative, and this time it's the narrative of the two spies going into Jericho and meeting up with Rahab. That is such an important story that the author wanted you to really know it and memorize it. So he put it as a chiasm. Okay, so let's read it. Rahab, Joshua 2. Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 men as spies, secretly saying, "Go, view the land, especially Jericho." So they went and came to the house of a harlot, whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. She brought them up to the roof and hid them in the stalks of flax which she had laid in order on the roof. Now, before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said, "I know that Yahweh has given you the land." Notice what she calls their God? Yahweh. She knows his name. I know that Yahweh has given you the land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. For we have heard how Yahweh dried up the waters of the Red Sea. Stop. That had happened 40 years earlier. How about that? At the beginning, before the wilderness trek had even gotten on the way, before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og. Now that had just recently happened within the last few months. And here, Rahab remembers what happened 40 years earlier and what happened just recently. And it seems like all those in Jericho knew it, whom you utterly destroyed. When we heard it, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in any man any longer because of you. For Yahweh, your God, he is God. Oh, listen to this. In heaven above and on earth beneath. Now this is a statement of belief. And she says, your God has no boundaries. You see, in that day and age, in antiquity, they believed that gods were land-bound. You had the god of Assyria, the god of Babylon, the god of Canaan. And only if there was a battle between the gods and the nations here on earth, and one nation conquered over another nation, well, that meant that the one God conquered over the other God. But she's stating, your God, Yahweh, is the God of all the heavens and the earth. Now, therefore, please swear to me by Yahweh, since I have dealt kindly with you, and she's hiding them, that you also will deal kindly with my father's household, and give me a pledge of truth, and spare my father and my mother and my brothers and my sisters, with all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. So she's wrapped it up, her whole family. So the men said to her, our life or yours, if you do not tell our business, this business of ours, and it shall come about when Yahweh gives us the land that we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall, so that she was living on the wall. Walls were so thick, in those days that they could build into them homes. She said to them, "Go to the hill country, so that the pursuers will not happen upon you, and hide yourselves there for 3 days until the pursuers return. Then afterward you may go on your way." The men said to her, "We shall be free from this oath to you, which you have made us swear, unless, when we come into the land, you tie this cord of scarlet," that famous scarlet cord thread, "in the window, through which you let us down, and gather to yourselves into the house your father and your mother and your brothers and all your father's household. It shall come about that anyone who goes out of the doors of your house, if somebody walks out of the doors, doesn't stay in this house, into the street, his blood shall be on his own head." In other words, it's not our fault, it's his fault, because he came out of the house. Then they say almost the same thing. Now, if you've noticed, I don't do any more letters. That's because I want you to put in the letters. Now watch this. They're going to say the same thing, only a reversal. "But anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head." In other words, if you guys get killed and you've stayed in the house, we're guilty, not you. Of course, that doesn't help them, does it? The people in the house. But they're swearing to this, that it is their promise. "If a hand is laid on him. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be free from the oath which you have made us swear." So the D, that D that you see, is now, "But anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head." Because they're saying it'll be our fault if something happens to you. So you put the D there. Yep. She said, "According to your words, so be it." And watch all the reversals that are coming up. "So she sent them on their way, and they departed. She tied the scarlet cord in the window, and they departed and came to the hill country." So she ties the scarlet cord. Remember, that's our sea. If you go back to the sea, they're saying, "You tie this cord of scarlet thread in the window." And now she's doing that. She tied the scarlet cord in the window. And they're going to do what she said to do. So she did what they said to do, and now they're going to do what she said to do. And so she tied the scarlet cord in the window was C. Now it's C again. And the B part, if you look up at the B and find the B, it's that what Rahab said, "Go to the hill country and hide yourselves there for 3 days until the pursuers return." And that's what they do. They departed and came to the hill country and remained there for 3 days until the pursuers returned. That's our B. Now the pursuers had sought them all along the road, but had not found them. Then the 2 men returned and came down from the hill country and crossed over and came to Joshua, the son of Nun, and they related to him all that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "Surely," now listen to these words because you've heard them before, "surely Yahweh has given all the land into our hands. Moreover, all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before us." Who said that? Rahab had said it at the very beginning. R.A. Now we put the A again. So why, let me put my coffee pot. Okay. Why are only 2 spies chosen? You ever wonder that? When Moses was sending spies in the land, he took the head men from each tribe. That's 12 tribes, right? Sent them into the land. So why only 2 now? Joshua had learned his lesson. He was one of the 2, Caleb being the other one, who came back with a good report. The others came back with a bad report. He knows better this time. He sends spies in the land, and only 2. It's all you need to get the information you want. Yeah. So, do you see how the reverse order, and yet the story progresses forward, doesn't it? Even though it starts out this way and ends up this way, that takes a lot of creativity, doesn't it? You have to work hard to write a story as good as this. Okay. We're going to do I showed you the chiasm on the next page. You can look at that now. Put this on pause and look at it and see how it worked. And then we're going to go to the play. Now, the play that I sent you the other day, the syllabus that I sent you the other day, has the wrong play in it. So you have to, I hope that you print out today's syllabus that I'm sending along with YouTube, because that has the correct story. Oh my goodness. I have the feeling that I just make different little mistakes, and that's okay. That's okay. One mistake is not mentioning the fact that we're not going to have a Bible study next week. Things have been happening, and I won't be able to do it next week. Okay, so but the following week I will do it. And after that, I think there's 2 or 3 weeks in November. And then comes Thanksgiving with our Christmas break. But, okay. So we're going to read John 7, 1 to 13. And I want you to circle the word feast as we're going through. This feast is the Feast of Booths. And the Feast of Booths is 6 months before Passover, the very Passover that Jesus is going to go into Jerusalem to attend, but it's that Passover where he's going to be crucified. So things are really warming up now. And so this story is leading up to that. 6 months beforehand. So circle the word feast, okay? After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea. That's in the southern part of Israel. That's where Jerusalem is, in Judea. Because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Yes, in Jerusalem, the Jewish leaders are seeking to kill him. Now, the Jews' Feast of Booths, remember feast, you're going to circle it, was at hand. So his brothers spoke to him. Now, let me just give you a little, we're going to look at the Feast of Booths because it's, except for Passover, it's, I think, the most interesting feast, and it's the one spoken of more in Scripture than any other feast, at least in the Old Testament. The Feast of Booths was a celebration. It was a feast of joy. People were to rejoice on this feast. They're commanded to. Okay, so let me tell you about the Feast of Booths. It was one of three feasts where people that are called the pilgrimage feasts. That meant that they had to travel, had to go to Jerusalem at that feast. Uh, so they're there, they're going to go there. Everybody's going to go there. It had to be celebrated in Jerusalem. It commemorated the wilderness wanderings where they had no fixed dwellings. So they had to build booths or tents, or some people call this the Feast of Tabernacles. Uh, they would collect branches and big and leaves and foliage to make these booths, and it was a lot of fun. Uh, they would those who lived in the city of Jerusalem would build their booth or tabernacle either on the roof of their house because their roofs were flat or in their courtyards. If you were coming from far away, you would build your booths outside the city. So there was a valley outside of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem is built on a mountaintop, very low mountain. We would call it a hill. And there was this valley, and then up the Mount of Olives, and it was covered with these booths. Uh, and it would be a very joyous time because some people hadn't seen each other for a year. Relatives, friends, people they met the year before would be all living next door to each other in booths. Reminds me of my days when my children were young and we went tenting with maybe anywhere from 5 to 8 or 9 families, and we'd set up our tents at a state park, and we all lived together communally for almost 5, 6 days. And we did this maybe 4 or 5 times during the summer. And it was just a great deal of fun. The kids played together, the adults talked to each other, ate together, made meals together. It was a lot of fun. Well, that's what's going on here. A lot of fun and joy. And it lasted 7 days. Um, and what they were celebrating was the fact that in the past, God had brought them through the wilderness in these tent homes. They lived in tents, in booths, tabernacles. They did that, and God had provided for them. Now, the Feast of Booths also was the time of a fall harvest. And you know that we have the spring harvest when certain vegetables come in and fruits. And then there's a fall harvest here, even in America. And they had that also. So people would bring their produce, it would go to the Lord. But really, what it would go to is everybody had loads of food to share, including the sacrifices, um, the the sheep, the goats, the herds. They would bring them for the sacrifices, and so really, the temple area in these feasts became a butcher shop, except there was no sales. They just, the meat, all the lambs and the sheep, the goats, all of it was shared amongst the people. So we have all this produce, all this sharing of meat. Uh, for widows and orphans, for the poor, for the rich. Everybody shared because they were feasting that now was the time when the food was coming in. And they didn't have to worry. There was plenty of food. Um, we often think, oh, what happened to all those sheep that were killed? It was shared amongst the people. Like I said, the temple area became a butcher shop. Um, okay, so the, we have this Feast of Booths. Um, and so we're going to look at this paper that has uh, three columns, and it's all the Feast of Booths. Now, you're going to notice, well, let me tell you right up front, there are seven feasts on the Jewish calendar. Now they celebrate Purim and Hanukkah, but that was not one of the feasts that God initiated. He gave them seven feasts, and every one of them was a feast. And it was what that word means. There was food. Um, but this was the Feast of Booths, and the Feast of Booths was the seventh of the seven feasts in a year. It was the last feast of the year, and it had every feast had something to do with sevens, whether it was the seventh month, or like Passover was the 14th day, a multiple of seven, or a week of 7 days, like the Feast of Booths was 7 days long, and it came on in the seventh month, and it was the seventh feast. Yes, so I want you to circle the word seven, and just see how multiple times everything is repeated. Except that they came a lot longer before John and his gospel. You would almost think they got the hint of doing everything in sevens from him, or not sevens, but duplication from him, because he's always repeating. Leviticus 23:33-36 says this, and Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of this seventh month, and for 7 days is the Feast of Booths. On the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. In other words, the first day of that feast is going to be like a Sabbath. It's not going to always occur on a Sabbath, but it's going to be like a Sabbath. So you're to commemorate it and do no work on that first day. Now, after that, there's going to be plenty of work to do. For 7 days, here we go again, you shall present food offerings to Yahweh. See, the food offerings would go to Yahweh. The priests would get their share first, and then the people would get the rest of all the food. On the 8th day, you shall hold a holy convocation again. The thing is, the 8th day really wasn't a part of the Feast of Booths. It just rounded it out, because you started the Feast of Booths on a Sabbath, and then the day after the end of Feast of Booths, you were going to have like a Sabbath rest. Not the Sabbath day, but a Sabbath rest. It is a solemn assembly. You shall not do any work on it. Got that? Don't work. We had a family across the street from our condominium who built a home, beautiful home, and on one of the balconies they put a tent at the Feast of Booths, and they had it up all week. Now, nobody lived in it. And you'll find that the Jews today, I've seen it in Cherry Hill, where they will put up a tent or something like that in their yard But whether they live in it or not for 7 days, I don't think they do. They might sleep in it one night. Then it's going to, in the same chapter, a verse later, it's going to say it all over again because it's so important. And we'll find out next week why it's so important. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when they gathered in the produce of the land, remember it's the fall produce, the fall harvest, you shall celebrate the feast. Celebrate. This is all celebration of Yahweh. 7 days. On the first day shall be a solemn rest, just like we said. And on the 8th day shall be a solemn rest. So it's kind of like an inclusio around the week, isn't it? And you shall take on the first day the fruit of splendid trees, branches of palm trees, and boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice. In other words, they're to take all these branches and all and build themselves booths. And you shall rejoice, command, rejoice before Yahweh your God. And they certainly did. They had a ball. Yahweh, your God, 7 days. You shall celebrate it as a feast to Yahweh for 7 days in the year. Lots of repetition here so that you don't forget. It is a statute forever. None of the other feasts have all this to do about them, just this Feast of Booths. It is a statute forever throughout your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days. All native Israelites shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the people of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh your God. And if that isn't enough, in Deuteronomy, Moses is going to repeat it all again. And so that last line in Deuteronomy 16, you shall keep the Feast of Booths 7 days. When you have gathered in the produce from your threshing floor and your winepress, you shall rejoice. There it is again, in your feast. You and your son, your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, the Levite, the sojourner, the fatherless, the widow who are within your towns, all celebrating together, sharing of food. For 7 days you shall keep the feast of Yahweh your God at the place that Yahweh will choose. Now, they don't know yet, they're not in the land, but the place Yahweh would choose would be Jerusalem, hundreds of years later. So they're waiting all that time for the place. God will bless you in all your produce and in all the work of your hands, so that you will be altogether, what? Joyful. So, sevens everywhere. Joy, celebration everywhere. Days of rest, not even including the Sabbath day, where they would probably rest at least one day on the Sabbath. It was a huge celebration of feasting. And it occurred in the fall season, the fall harvest, when there was plenty of food for all. Every night, now this was the fun part, every night people lit torches and kind of like danced through the streets with these torches. And there was singing of psalms. And then at the end of the night there was pouring out of water. Let me say, people would say, what's this about pouring out water? Well, you can imagine in a land where they depended on water, that water was important to them. It was almost sacred. Nobody wasted water, because who knew when the next rain would come? So this was like a sacrifice. Now let me give you two little stories about this. When Samuel, when the people repented, and I think we read this story a couple weeks ago. When the people repented, when Samuel offered a sacrifice to God, one of the things he did was pour out water. That was to say, God, I give you what is most important to me. And the same thing happened in the life of David, kind of. If you remember, he had a group of men that were very important to him. Now, he had hundreds of men. This is before he became a king. He was hiding out from Saul, and he was in Judah, down south, hiding out. And one day he said in front of his men, "Oh, what I wouldn't give for a drink from the well of Bethlehem." Now remember, Bethlehem was his birthplace, and there was a well outside the gates of the city. And he was just, "Oh, if I could just have a drink." Well, three of his men decided that they were going to get a drink for David. Now, they didn't tell him they were going to do this, but they went, and it was an occupied city. They had taken their lives in their hands to get that water, because they could have been killed by the troops of Saul. But they did get the water, and they brought it back to David, and he thought, I'm not worth this sacrifice. You almost died. I must offer this as a sacrifice to God. God, I'm giving you what I most wanted. And he poured out the water. Well, in this Feast of Booths, each night they poured out water. They lit torches and went through the towns. Okay, so let's go back to our story. We're on verse 3 in our play, and it says this: "So his brothers spoke to him, and the brothers said, 'Leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples—'" Now that's where Jerusalem is, where they were thinking about killing Jesus, right? So his brothers say, "Leave here, go to Jerusalem, that your disciples may see the works you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." What? They know as well as everybody else knows that if he goes to Jerusalem, they may try to kill him. What does that tell you about his brothers? They definitely weren't believers. And we get that from the other Gospels too. Their brothers came to get him because they thought he was crazy. What's really interesting is these same brothers who hated him enough to have him killed even. And that does sound like Joseph and his brothers, doesn't it? When they saw the risen Christ, they became believers. And James, the one brother, was willing to die. Now that's one of the proofs of the resurrection. Yep. That here's a man who was willing to die. Would he be willing to die for a lie? We might be willing to die for an idea, but not for a lie. And yet James was willing to die for what he saw, and he saw the risen Savior. Okay, so then, if you do these things, show yourself to the world. for not even his brothers believed in him. Jesus spoke to them. My time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about it that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I'm not going up to this feast, for my time is not yet fully come. Violence was in the air, but it was not the right time for Jesus. And it wasn't the right feast. What feast was he waiting for? The Passover. I am not going up to this feast. Are you circling the word feast? For my time has not yet fully come. After saying this, he remained in Galilee. But after his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he also went up, not publicly, but in secret. See, it was at his father's right timing. And the father would always reveal to his son what he wanted his son to do. And he hadn't revealed to Jesus at the time he was speaking to his brothers that he was to go. But after his brothers left, Jesus, following his father's orders, goes up to the feast. Oh, and notice he goes in secret, not openly like his brothers wanted him to do. But after his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he also went up, not publicly, but in secret. The Jews were looking for him at the feast. Where is he? Why are they expecting him to be at the feast? Why is everybody expecting him to be at the feast and saying, where is he? Because the Feast of Booths was a feast that everybody had to come to Jerusalem. And they were expecting him to be there because he did follow the law. And there was much muttering about him among the people. While some said, he is a good man, others said, no, he's leading the people astray. Yet for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly of him. And this is 6 months before that Passover where he's going to be crucified. And what we're going to see in the next couple weeks is what he's going to say when he gets to Jerusalem, because he's going to go right to the temple where he's safe and teach the people during that time. He's going to spend a lot of time in Jerusalem at this feast. Okay, remember, we're not going to get together next week. And I'm sorry I'm late this week, but things got out of hand. I ran out of time each day, and I really fit in the time today because I wanted to teach you. You know that I love you, and I appreciate all those who hit the like button or make a comment. It makes me feel good. I thank you for joining me each week. God bless you. I'll see you in 2 weeks.